yesterday I had a friend on Facebook, Dave, who wrote about how we sometimes just don't see how broken people close to us truly are. Also, he wrote that spreading hope and so on is important. So I commented on this post that, in my opinion, it is not spreading hope that is important here. And I said that knowledge is important on how to deal with your emotions, how to control them. And without giving this knowledge to ourselves and our close people, we're not solving anything by spreading any hopes or whatever. So he wrote to me a message that he would like to know more about my knowledge to remove anxiety. And I promised him that I will record a video, fundamentals in solving anxiety, on this fundamentals of this knowledge that I acquired 2 years ago that worked for me. This video might be quite long. I will go through basic understandings about anxiety. Then I will give some basic definitions. Then I will give an algorithm that I found out to solve anxiety. Then I will give 2 examples of how to solve simple anxiety and how to solve complex one. And after all, I will give one exact formula that I am using for solving an emotion of fear. I start with warnings. My English might be with mistakes, all kinds of mistakes. So if something is not clear, please turn to me and ask me again. Maybe I just understand some word differently or something. Okay, now that I have warned you, I can start with the topic. And first thing I want to say is that anxiety is a very, very good and powerful state of human body and mind, unless it is chronic or it is hard to detect what purpose it serves. I give you a short example of why anxiety is very powerful and very good state. For example, I am preparing for a marathon. I had this experience actually. I was preparing for my marathon with roller skates, and I am not a sportive girl, but I wanted to do this. And when we were driving to a place, we had this 3 or 4 hour car trip to go. And in the car, I started to feel this very huge anxiety. It just blew my whole body. And what actually happened that I like to make correlation with some planes and some cars and some engines. And what happened is that my body started to prepare myself for this event, and it started to switch on my breathing system to the level it will need in this competition. So I started to breathe deeply and more and get more oxygen, and my heart started to beat faster, and I had muscle tonus really high, and it really felt like my body was starting to warm up for this huge event that I was going to. And when we arrived, my body was on full engines, so it was completely ready for this many kilometers of physical action. Only thing I needed to do before start was to put my roller skates on and make some laps to finish this warm-up of my body. I had great fear and great anxiety before that I will not accomplish this task. It was a big goal for a person like me, but this huge anxiety prepared my body, and in the end I accomplished the marathon, and I was very happy for my achievement. So what would happen if I just removed this anxiety and I just switched it off? Probably I would not accomplish this. So with this example, I wanted to say that we do not have to remove anxiety, and we also cannot do it. We only can cut our brain out of our bodies if we want to remove anxiety. So what we can do is we have to use it, or solve it. As I mentioned already, anxiety is good unless it is chronic or it is hard to detect what purpose it serves. So from this, we need to understand how chronic or purposeless anxiety is developing. I have this belief that developed in 2 years of my study of this knowledge and practice and achieving some good results. So this belief is that chronic or purposeless anxiety is developing from very poor emotion management. Here I want to give you one example from my own experience. When I was a child, I lost my mother and I lost my brother. My mother went away to Siberia, thousands of kilometers away from me. She took my brother with her and I never really had contact after that, and I was broke. It was a tragedy for me and it was very, very hard to go through. And at that time, my father fell in depression about this, and also he couldn't give me any love anymore. So I went from a child with perfect childhood, with lots of love, lots of support, lots of interaction, to a child who doesn't have any love whatsoever. But this need inside of me, of course, it didn't go anywhere. So I turned to my father many times to receive this love and support again. And I couldn't. He couldn't give it to me. So what did I do? I was a very clever girl at the time, and I decided, okay, I will put aside all my crying, all my feeling bad, everything, and I will focus on one thing, on studying, on learning, on getting the best grade. And this is how I was planning to get back my father's love, to earn it. So I did it. And in the end of that year, I came home with my grades for that class. I had almost all A's, and only one grade was one level less than A. So I felt like, wow, I accomplished impossible, because in the circumstances where I needed love, I needed support, I lacked everything that was my basic resources. I still found willpower and I still found a way to achieve amazing results. So I came to my father with this document that stated my grades, with very big anticipation of, oh my God, now I'm gonna receive all this love and all this care and all this joy and everything. And what happened, he said to me that, you know what, you could get 100% A's, not 99. And what happened, I didn't get my need met. So my unconsciousness decided to start to ignore those needs, because at that point it decided that those needs are impossible to meet. So when something is impossible, you have to, ignore it. So it started to ignore and pull out of my consciousness those needs. So, and after a while, I went to a state where I have a storage with those ignored and pulled out needs that I am not even able to detect anymore, to count and keep track of. I'm just not aware of those needs. It doesn't work with our body like if we ignore, then it doesn't exist. It exists. And I kept on having this anxiety because my needs were unmet, but I could not detect anymore what kind of needs they are. So from that time on, I thought that the purpose of my anxiety is only to get more A grades, to achieve more perfect results. So this is what I thought that anxiety was for. But actually, truly, I had even more important and urgent needs to be met, that this anxiety was actually trying to serve. So, but because I did not recognize them anymore, if we don't meet the underlying needs, then anxiety is not going away. Never. Now I want to give you some definitions I arrived to after this study of the knowledge, the materials that I got from this Ukrainian psychologist. Her name is Yana Lan. I studied for 2 years all her videos. Unfortunately, they are not public anymore. She removed them from her channel, almost all of them. And I feel very lucky that I had 2 years to watch every day. I also bought almost all of her trainings and I practice on everything, every technique she gave. So after all of this, I arrived at these definitions. And one of these definitions I want to give you is chronic anxiety is very many or very important unmet and or even undetected needs. This is the definition that I think could be used universally. But before we go to the algorithm, I would like to give another definition, which I think is very important, fundamentally important here. And this definition is about emotion. And I believe that emotion is a sign of a need. It means every emotion informs you about your need. So we have positive and negative emotions, and always, regardless of which group it is, it always shows you your need. In case of positive emotions, it shows you that, hey, there was a need that was not met, but now it is met. So you start to feel joy, happiness, or I don't know, the relief or whatever it is, whatever good emotion it is, it shows you that some kind of need was finally met. And the negative emotion is always showing you that there is a need that is not met. Now about the algorithm. How am I solving anxiety? You can have two approaches. One of them I call single point approach, and another one I call management approach. And the difference is only in scale, because the algorithm is always the same. So the algorithm is the following. First of all, you have to detect emotion. Many times, like in my example, it is that we unconsciously already are programmed to ignore our emotions, and to get them out of the box again, you have to allow yourself to feel an emotion. So the first step of the algorithm is allow yourself to feel an emotion. So when you allowed yourself and you start to recognize that, okay, I have this emotion. Let's say I have this emotion of sadness. So the next thing you have to do is you have to detect which need is this emotion informing you about, which need is unmet that this emotion is signaling to you about. For example, with my sadness, I might think for a while. Let's say I arrive at understanding that this sadness is actually telling me about a need of love. So I have accomplished the second step of algorithm. Now I know what kind of emotion I am having, what kind of need that is unmet it is informing me about. And I have this third step of the algorithm left to arrive to my need met and my emotion changed from negative to positive. And this last step of this algorithm is the most complex, the most uneasy one, because you have very wide range of possibilities here. But what you have to do, you have to find the right way, the best way, how to meet this need, how to satisfy this need. Let's see an example. If I have this sadness, actually it was a big deal for me when I started to use this management approach. I was able to find out that sadness is most often experienced, and 70% of what I felt was sadness. And it was actually that I arrived at understanding that this sadness is signaling about huge amounts of love needed in my life, in myself. So I started to think, how can I get this love? And I went through all of the things that were impossible to me. I couldn't turn to my dad, he was already dead in this time. I could not turn to my mother, she couldn't understand me. I couldn't turn to almost anyone on this planet. And I had this feeling like no one understands me and no one really can love me the way I need it. So I started to brainstorm in myself, what else can I do to get this love? So I started to imagine, like, okay, if I was the best man for myself, what would I do? And it was easier already, because if I was this loving husband of myself, or loving parent, loving mother of myself, or even loving father of myself, what would I do to give me love? And then I had lots of different ideas, starting from I could hug myself, and I said, okay, I try to hug myself like myself. I will give this love to myself. Or I could take myself to an excursion, or I could ask myself, what do you need? What do you want, honey? What do you want, my baby, my child? Step by step, with this conversation inside of myself, all about what is the way to meet, to satisfy this need, I was starting to discover the right things that actually truly satisfies this need, one emotion at a time. How do you know that this need is actually met? The only indicator is that you start to have positive emotion instead of this negative one. Then you're absolutely sure, okay, now this is met. And that's why it doesn't work when you are given ready-made list of how to make yourself happy, or how to love yourself, or for example, you can get many variants of lists on YouTube or everywhere, like starting with take yourself for a movie, take yourself for a restaurant, take yourself for a nice walk, I don't know, whatever else. And if you don't observe yourself, and you don't have this observation in which exactly moment you switch from negative to positive emotion, then you will not satisfy your needs with other people's list, because some people make their hair done and they feel better, their need is satisfied. For me it doesn't work, because I need like a conversation about high level, I don't know, rocket science, and then I feel this inspiration, and then my need is met. So anyway, you have to know yourself, you have to observe yourself, you have to keep track on your emotions, how they change, and only then you start step by step to know yourself and to be able to find the right solution for yourself in every situation. So yeah, the third part of this algorithm is very complex. It requires a lot of work, a lot of observation, a lot of effort, a lot of attention, and it's totally worth it, because every time you find this right way for every separate emotion, every time you have this bingo moment and your negative emotion is turning to positive one, it's amazing how you feel. And starting from that point, it is only thing you want to feel in your life and only thing you want to do in your life. At least it happened with me. Okay, we have this algorithm. You allow yourself to feel, you detect your emotion, you understand what need is this emotion telling you about, and you find the right way, not just a way to meet or satisfy this need. You have to find a right way. It means you have to go through quite of some of them. And now, when we know this algorithm, we can talk a little bit about this management approach of solving the anxiety. When it is not the case that you have one or two very strong and important unmet needs, when you have those needs spread around and you don't really understand what's going on, you have this state of chronic anxiety when very many needs are unmet or undetected. So how can you use this management approach? You have to first of all observe all of these emotions. And here this psychologist, this Jana Lan, she gave absolutely amazing, in my opinion, exercise that you can do for 1 week. So you get these little sticky paper notes, and every time you feel an emotion, you write it down on this little note. You write down what kind of emotion you feel, like angry or anxiety or sadness or pain or happiness or joy, whatever. We quite know this alphabet of emotions, right? So this is what you write down, and under that you write down what kind of situation you are in. For example, I feel joy and now I am cooking lunch. So you just write it down, you stick it to a wall. I did it to a wall or in some book of yours or whatever. And then for a week you just do only this. You every time you feel emotion, you write it down what kind of emotion it is. You write down what kind of situation it is. Are you on a walk, or are you in conversation with some person, or are you at I don't know, at exam or whatever. Of course, sometimes you cannot do it on the spot. Then you can go back through those memories in the evening and try and write down what you remember. So after 1 week, you collect all these notes and you divide them by group of positive or negative emotion, and then you divide them in groups of emotion. For example, anger in one place and sadness in another place, and then you count how much of anger you had this week, how much of sadness. And what happens, you are able to see which are the most common emotion. In my case, it appeared to be sadness. I was convinced that it will be anger, because I had this experience where people quite often told me, "Why are you so angry? And what is it your anger about? And you are so aggressive. You are so angry," and so on. So I thought, like, why would I do this exercise? I know already that my biggest problem is anger. And it turned out that it was sadness. And afterwards, after 2 years now, I see that I had not enough anger, not enough aggression actually to solve that situation. But this is another story, because of course already now you have many of ready-made formulas for every type of emotion. And I will give you one example of this formula in the end of this video. But before, I want to give you 2 examples how to solve anxiety One example is very simple. Let's say you need bread for breakfast, and now you are looking at your watch and you see that the shop is closing in 10 minutes. So you start, first of all, if you pay attention, you start to feel fear. That is fear of staying without bread for breakfast. If you ignore this fear, the more time is going, the more anxiety you start to feel again, if you don't ignore your feelings and emotion. Now, what is the solution in this situation? You can just get up, go to a shop and buy this bread. Take it home and say, okay, the shop is closed now, but I have bread, so my need is met. I have solved it. And of course, this anxiety or fear, it's gone and it's never coming back unless you have the same situation again. So it is very simple. But of course, we are not talking about simple anxiety here. We are talking about very complex anxiety where you cannot even detect where it comes from, what it serves. For example, today I woke up and I remembered my promise to Dave that I will do a video on fundamentals of solving anxiety. And I was starting to feel so huge anxiety. So what did I do? I tried to detect, okay, what kind of need is this showing to me? And quite fast, because I have experience, I have this 2.5 year experience, so it was more easy for me, but still it is a complex case because my need was to achieve something big, to formulate the essence of my knowledge. With my experience, I knew already that to accomplish this huge, complex task, I will need really notable resources. I started by letting myself feel deeply this anxiety, and I was having again this state of engines on. I had breathing that became much larger, I had heartbeat, I had muscle tonus, and parallelly with that I allowed myself to feel this huge anxiety coming, I also started by slowly detecting my more basic needs. For example, I start to feel big need of support. I start to feel big need of confidence. As I was researching my needs and my emotions for more than 2 years now, I know that I have a huge list of resources actually, and now I know that sometimes I can get my need of support satisfied by just making an order in my room. So what I did, I took this big energy of my anxiety and I went to my bedroom and I made my bed done, and so on. Little by little I started to feel that I need some care of myself to be confident, and I eat breakfast and I do those very basic, very simple things one by one to gain some confidence, to gain some support, to take care of myself, and through this acquire more and more support and confidence. In the end, when I was feeling confident enough, supported enough, and still anxious enough, I started writing this plan of this video. I started to write the essence of this knowledge and started to write a list of fundamentals that I would like to give information on. So I finished my writing of 4 pages plan. I went through in my mind how will I talk about. So I finished that preparation, and now I'm almost finished with this video. And guess what? I don't feel any anxiety whatsoever anymore because I have used all this energy that anxiety gave me to accomplish this goal, to meet very high level need of achieving something big. Yes, of course, a new anxiety will come and it is already looking from behind the corner at me because it's how it works. You deal with one anxiety. For some time, you have this satisfaction, you have those positive emotions, and then the next comes, and then you have to solve another one. But I promised to give the last thing, and materials of these psychologists I mentioned previously were full with the ready-made formulas for every emotion, how you can get shorter path to detect the right way how to meet your need. And I cannot go through all of them here, like I cannot explain the science of mathematics in one video. It's clear to everybody, right? I want to give you one formula that I use to solve one emotion, and it is fear. When I detect fear in myself, what I do? First, I divide all my fear emotions into two groups, and these groups are very relative because I deeply believe that all of my fears are absolutely rational. The point is that they sometimes are so complex that we call them irrational. But for simplicity reasons, I do this with all my fears. First, I detect which group it belongs, rational or irrational, and I use just one criteria to detect which group it belongs. This criteria is if I can spend 5 to 10 minutes thinking about how to solve this fear, and then I have 100% clear steps how to go and solve this fear right now, then it is rational fear. And it is kind of fear with staying without bread for breakfast when you have 10 minutes until shop is closing. You have very simple solution. You just have to go and buy this bread and come back and everything's solved. So if I find this solution in 5 or 10 minutes time, which is 100% solving my fear, then I just go and do it. You have many examples here. For example, you are starting to feel uncomfortable, starting to feel fear that your button could fall off. Can you solve it in 5 minutes? In most cases, yes, of course. So you go and you solve. Sometimes you can solve the majority of these little fear emotions, which if they are not solved, they are many. They turn into anxiety. But if you solve them one by one, when they appear, then you will not have this path to anxiety, most certainly, because you have this good psychological hygiene, you have this good emotional management. But with the most complex cases, we have these irrational fears, a lot of them. If I think for 5 minutes or 10 and I cannot get this 100% clear steps to resolve it. For example, 2 years ago I was turning 34 and I couldn't get my relationships in good shape. I couldn't still get into building a family, and I wanted children so bad, and I started to have this fear that I will never accomplish this, that I will never have children, that I will be late with my age to have children. And this was absolutely huge fear that came. And what I did, I said, okay, can I solve it in 5 or 10 minutes? No. No, it is so complex problem, and it is so complex fear. So fortunately I found out this algorithm, how I deal with fears that I put into irrational group. And this is very basic. I will not explain it now. I will just give this formula. Try it out. So first what I do is increase my self-esteem. I detect irrational fear, the fear that I put into this group of irrational fears. And next thing I do, I start to think, how do I increase my self-esteem? Fantastic algorithm that helped me work with this self-esteem is the following: paying more attention and respect to my emotions and needs. Usually I start with the simplest. So I detect this huge fear that I cannot solve of being late for having children and make a family. I cannot solve it in 5-10 minutes. I couldn't solve it in 2 decades. So I said, okay, now I start observing the very simple needs of mine. So I start by going through, oh, maybe I need some care of myself. Maybe, oh, right now I just started to feel I'm thirsty. I want to drink water. And I go and I drink water, and I go and I take care of myself with the very, very simplest things. After some time, I find myself in a situation where I took care of myself. I took care of somebody else. I took care of my home. I took care of my studies. I took care of my work, because with those simple little steps, I created this huge amount of met needs, satisfied needs. They consist of very simple, very small needs. But on this ground of so many simple needs satisfied, I start to feel confident, like, I can do much more than this. And then I start to feel like, oh, but this other woman, she had her first child at 40, and I'm 34. And I am dealing with all my needs so good, and I'm dealing with my life so good now. So of course I will accomplish this. And this is the way how almost all of my irrational fears are solved now. Okay. I could really go for days and weeks and years discussing all this. I want to say more and more and more, and I want to talk about it like endlessly. But now I need to do work, big work, for preparing for court. And also I have to take care of my finances now. And by the way, I am pregnant. Really. I not only solved the fear, I also solved somehow the situation what I was feared about. So yeah, now I have other fears to solve. So I gave you in this video, I tried to give you this essence of my knowledge of these fundamentals, in my opinion, for solving this anxiety. But of course, I cannot wait that it's gonna work like this. It took me 2 years and much more information, many more techniques. But I hope that maybe this seed grows big and we see a big tree, like with me. Like 2 years ago or 2.5 years ago, I couldn't even imagine that I can feel so much less anxiety in everyday life, and I can get rid of almost all of my sadness. Still, of course, life is complicated, and still I haven't achieved this perfect state. I have a lot of work to do, and of course I come from a very, very low background, very hard situations, and therefore to reach this goal that somebody else with much more support and much more love could reach already, for me it will be much more of work. So yeah, there are still problems that are not solved in my situation. No, I will not tell you. I will not tell you now. But this was my first video in English. I don't know if I will publish it, because I don't know if I will evaluate it as a good one. So we'll see. Anyway, thank you so much if you were listening, because if you were listening to this point, I am more than touched. Okay, see you soon. Bye.